Hello everybody, this is Claire Van Steenwhite coming to you from my home office in Sun City, West Arizona. I want to talk to you a little bit about an experience we just had last week when we went to the Arizona Redistricting Commission meeting in, what was it, Surprise, yeah, that's it, Surprise. And it was a little disappointing and also quite a bit frustrating at times. I basically went there because in the field I worked in for years, most of my life actually, I was in logistics and marketing and demographics distribution with hundreds of vehicles on the road, similar to a small UPS operation, delivering to stores on a daily basis, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. However, when I looked at the plan that they had basically laid out for CD8 in the West Valley, LD21 and LD22, it didn't make any geographic or demographic sense to me. So I thought I would go there and explain why I didn't think it would work or why it was not a good idea. And what ended up happening was before I got to speak, some other people did. There were the mayor and some other people, and they were talking about some of the same things. But in that opening part of it, there was also another group of it that was there. What they call the indigenous people or native Indians and Hispanics or Latinos. And they all believed that they should have special areas sliced out of the state where their population was the dominant population, and they could thereby get what they considered to be representation, even though geographically it was wrong, because when you really think about what they wanted, and I did think about this, what they're saying is they don't care who else lives within that area geographically, as long as they have the dominance in it as a voting bloc. That way they can dictate who the representatives are and what the issues are. That's basically what they were saying and what they were asking for in both sides. When I finally got up to speak, and let me emphasize this one issue. Nobody was interrupted during this whole meeting up until that point. They said we were all going to have two minutes, I believe it was. Most people went over their 2 minutes without any trouble at all. Nothing was said by anybody on the board that interrupted anybody that said, you know, you've got to close now. Any of that went on. However, when I got up to speak, I started off talking about how they had sliced up LD 21 and 22. And they also moved CD8 farther away from the West Valley, closer to the all the way over to the 17. And on the other side of the 101, I might add, for the most part. And the way they carved up Sun City, part of the northern part of it wasn't in that LD, and part of the southeast part wasn't either, which I really don't understand, since Sun City is a senior citizens community that you would think would want to be represented that way, since they're all locked in. It is a senior citizens community, as in Sun City West and Sun City Grand and Sun City Festival and Arizona Traditions and others in the West Valley. After I explained to them why I believed it was a mistake to put Tarteso, which is way at the bottom of, down by the 10 freeway, off of what is Sun Valley Parkway, Bell Road turns into Sun Valley Parkway, inside LD, what would then be 29, because it's over 25 miles from where we are as a group. And they're much closer to the other LDs just on the other side of the freeway or just to the west, just to the east of them. It didn't make geographic sense or demographic sense. They were putting Sun City Festival back into LD29, which used to be LD22, before that 4, because the majority of people that live there shop in Surprise and the areas here, have friends here, go to clubs and meetings and all other types of things, quite frankly because there's nowhere to shop out there. After I said that, I went into discussing the other groups that had spoken. I didn't intend to talk about that, but then again, I didn't realize this was going to be brought up. And as I sat there and listened to these people ask for special slices of, say, the pie in their own best interest, what they consider to be best interest, without any regard to others that might be locked into those same districts, I commented on this. One of my comments was, I remember back in the 50s and 60s, We marched to have segregation done away with. We marched to integrate schools. We marched for a lot of things. And I discussed those issues. And I said, basically what you're telling me is you want to be politically segregated. Now my feelings on this are very simple. Constitutionally, that's not what redistricting is about. In the Constitution, you have voting mentioned basically 3 times. The overall voting rights for all U.S. citizens. Then you had the voting rights change a little bit down in the South so that they couldn't charge a poll tax, etc., etc. And then you had the women's right to vote, which I believe they always had because they were U.S. citizens. I never did figure that one out. And then when you lowered the voting age to 18. I also believe all of those other amendments to the Constitution could have just been put into the amendment that was already there, that giving all U.S. citizens a right to vote. But that right is for U.S. citizens and not anyone else. And as I believe most of us know, we do believe, especially here in Arizona, that that was infringed upon in this last election. I know I definitely do, especially since you figure we had so many new federal-only voters end up on the rolls, and a number of them were not citizens, and everybody knows it. And special deals were made with a radical left-wing group by Governor Ducey, then Senator Secretary of State Reagan, and your President Attorney General Brnovich, who's about as needed as sand is in the desert. But this seemed to slip by everybody. They didn't seem to understand that you can't cut out a piece of pie out of an area and say, this is going to be for this certain special ethnic group. Because when you really understand how this is all done, especially say in the Latino or Hispanic community, their ancestors are, yeah, Inca, Aztec, and Maya Indians, and some American Indians who went south, but they're also Spanish, and that is European, which is one of the things a lot of them don't like when you consider they look at all of us as though we're the enemy, kind of like that critical race theory nonsense. But toward the end of the meeting, Jean, my wife, and myself stayed there for the entire meeting. We wanted to hear what everybody had to say. Now remember, the beginning of the meeting was opened up with these groups that wanted special slices of the pie. Well, the end of the meeting went the same way. Almost as though you'd call it a political staging group. We started, we finished. And after these 5 people got up and said what they wanted to say about a special area just for them in these certain areas. I happen to know the areas quite well because I've run for Congress, and that was the entire CD8. So I know what the makeup is in those areas. And I know you really can't cut a little slice out of, say, Youngtown or El Mirage without other people of other ethnic mixes, if you're going to do this by ethnicity, being stuck into those things, with them feeling like they have no voice. I don't believe this is right, and at the very end of the meeting, because no one else got up to speak when these kids were done, and I say kids because most of them were, but I did notice one commissioner on that board say this: we need to find a way that we can empower these children. Empower these children. That is not what voting is about, not the way she was talking about it, and not the way they were presenting it. You have a right to vote, a God-granted right to vote, if and only if you are a U.S. citizen. If you're not a U.S. citizen, quite frankly, I don't even believe you ought to be at the meeting. Because you can't go to the voting polls, so why would you be at the meeting? You can't even fill out petitions. You can't recruit signatures for petitions because you aren't able to register to vote if you're not a citizen. So if you're not able to even acquire signatures for people running for office, why would you be able to go to a meeting about how all of this should be handled? I find that really quite offensive. I realize some people may not, but I do. I also realize that I believe some of these people that were at that meeting are not U.S. citizens, not constitutionally U.S. citizens. They may be U.S. citizens by what some people consider citizens in our day, but constitutionally, to be a citizen of this country, one parent had to be a citizen. To be a natural-born citizen, both parents had to be a citizen. And that's still in the Constitution. It hasn't changed. Because if you were born within our borders, and say your parents were ambassadors from another country, their children were not citizens, even though they were born within our borders, because their parents weren't citizens. Our founders did this for a very simple reason. They didn't want America's interests represented by non-citizens, or people who were raised in non-citizen communities. That was the original intent, and I'm what they call an original intent person. I like the original intent of our U.S. Constitution. I believe it's what's made this country great, and I believe it's the only thing that'll keep this country great. When you start getting off into diverse areas, as I pointed out when I spoke, we all pledged allegiance to the United States of America. America. We're all Americans, and we're not hyphenated Americans. I resent that deeply. And I have a proud heritage. Both of my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents were all Dutch from the Netherlands. My great-great-grandparents, that's where they came from. And they married other Dutch people in the communities they lived in throughout Michigan, Iowa, and that area. However, I'm an American. I've never been a hyphenated American. Yeah, I have a Dutch heritage, and I know that while I lived in Iowa for a while, they had tulip festivals, and we had wooden shoes in our home when we were kids. All of that was there. But we were Americans. That's how we were raised. We weren't raised as Dutch Americans. We were just raised as Americans. And I believe this country is not going to come back together again until everybody that says they want part of the pie understands that if you don't want to be an American, then why don't you just go back to wherever it is you came from, whether you flew in the country, came across on a boat from Asia or Europe, entered in legally or illegally. If you don't like it, go home somewhere else. Set up a new country someplace else. Don't change ours. I resent it, and I believe most Americans actually do. I realize we have people in Washington, D.C. right now, and throughout the country that don't. They're trying to transform America into a socialist, communist, Marxist country. We're not interested. Don't want one, and we will fight to prevent it. But keep real good look at what's going on with these redistricting boards and meetings and what some of these people are saying. Because that comment by that young woman was telling to me, we need to figure out a way to empower you. Now, does she have some kind of a special thing she wants to do? Does she have her own agenda other than what's supposed to do? If so, she should be taken off the board. Once again, spread the news, let everyone know. Keep us in your prayers, we'll keep you in ours. We all need each other's prayers, and we all need to be held up with each other. E pluribus union, from the many, one. We are one nation under God, not several. We're Americans. That's what united us for generations now. We better get back to it while we still can, before they unravel the very threads of this country. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this. God bless you. Have a great day. And remember, we will be back. Bye for now. And watch the politicians. As you well know, you can't trust them. God bless. Bye-bye.